Overcoming scapegoat survivors' fear of not loving enough. Do you worry that others will think you do not care about them enough if you do something for yourself? Deep down, do you believe you are selfish and unable to love people the way they require? And does life feel like you're always on the verge of disappointing others? Well, a narcissistic parent believes that their scapegoat child owes them attention, admiration, and obedience. And this belief protects the parent from feeling unlovable. The trade-off is that their child must constantly deliver on what the parent is owed. So if a child fails to meet this obligation, then the parent can feel intense shame. These feelings of shame disrupt the narcissistic parent's inflated self-worth. The parent blames the child for this. They do not acknowledge their own fear of being unlovable. It is the child's fault for not doing X or Y, which of course led to the parent's upset. The parent may then devalue, deprive, and domineer the child in response. The scapegoat child then feels unlovable for not loving the parent enough. Well, in today's video, I explain why scapegoat survivors of narcissistic parents may fear that they cannot love others enough. And this was the psychological lesson taught by their narcissistic parent. The real problem was never that they did not love the parent enough. Rather, the parent did not find themselves to be lovable. This insight, though, is often not enough to improve one's quality of life. So I will explain how scapegoat survivors find new experiences to trust that they can now love others. This happens in safe relationships where the other believes in your love for them. My name's Jay Reed, and I'm a licensed psychotherapist in California, and I specialize in helping survivors of narcissistic abuse reclaim the quality of life that they deserve. And I want to let you know about a new opportunity to further your recovery from narcissistic abuse. It's called the Rise and Reclaim Healing Toolkit for Scapegoat Survivors. And in it, you'll receive my book called Growing Up as the Scapegoat Child to Narcissistic Parents, A Guide to Healing. You'll also get a worksheet that offers a structured approach to organizing your recovery process, focusing on key areas of healing each month. And finally, you'll receive the Quick Guide to Recovery from Narcissistic Abuse, which offers a concise, easy to follow guide that outlines the essential steps to start your recovery and regain control of your life. And you can find the link to the toolkit in the description box below. When a narcissistic parent feels unworthy of love, a narcissistic parent is phobic of feelings that do not contribute to their pride. At the same time, they do not believe that they deserve love just as they are. So to keep themselves intact, they must keep this belief unconscious. The parent recruits their scapegoat child in service of denying the parent's unlovability. The child goes along because they need to know their love can reach the parent. It's fundamental for all children to know that their parent can receive and value that child's love for them. If their parent endorses the child's love, then the child has something inside of them that is special. So neither the parent nor the child can acknowledge that the former, the parent, feels undeserving of love. If the parent cannot feel loved, then the child loses them. They would have to see their parent as irreparably unloved, where nothing the child shows the parent can change this. In such a scenario, it can seem like their parent is physically alive, yet dead on the inside. And that is just too much for any child to bear. If the parent cannot feel loved by the child, then this must reflect the lack of value of the love that the child has to offer, or so the child concludes. The child's fundamental need to know that they possess the ability to love their parent goes unmet, and this can leave the child feeling incomplete as a person. This outcome, too, is intolerable. Why the scapegoat child must fix the parent's feeling unloved. The scapegoat child has to understand what is happening in a way that affords them hope. It is not that their parent is incapable of feeling loved. It is also not that the child is incapable of demonstrating worthwhile love. It is just that neither has happened yet. Hope that the parent can eventually feel loved requires that the child have control over this outcome. But no child can control their parents' feelings in reality. So the scapegoat child must distort reality in a way that says that they can. They do this by unconsciously assuming responsibility for mom or dad's feelings. If the child is responsible, then they also have control over how their parent feels. Now the formula is in place for a false harmony between parent and child. And here's how it works. The parent may feel unloved unless others show them admiration and obedience. When they do feel unloved, they can blame their scapegoat child. This child would rather accept that they are at fault than know the parent cannot feel loved. Fourth, the child must live with the dread that others will discover their inability to love. Now the scapegoat child has a parent who's capable of giving and receiving love. It is just that the child is too deficient for the parent to feel this way at the moment. So let's illustrate this with an anonymized case example. Peter always felt like he owed his mother a debt he could never repay. Whenever she was around, all of his attention went to her. It was an uneasy state for him. He didn't feel like he was choosing this. It felt mandatory, though he did not know why. Peter's mother easily saw others as deliberately depriving her of the love and attention that she thought she deserved. She routinely accused her husband of this. At the dinner table, she might pose a seemingly innocent question like, "So how was your day at work?" to her husband. Then she would find something in his response to be proof that he did not care about her. After he explained that he was having trouble with a coworker who was missing deadlines, she might say, "See, that's all you ever think about, what other people are doing for you. Gosh, you are just so selfish." These exchanges terrified Peter as he looked on. He was confused about how his father could make his mother so angry. But she must not be so angry over nothing. So, Peter reasoned, his father must not be paying enough attention to her. Peter unconsciously resolved to not make the same mistake with his mother and to keep her at the top of his mind at all times. Peter's mother would still find fault with how he tried to show his love for her. When Peter's world began to enlarge by going to kindergarten, he started being invited to his friends' homes for play dates. His mother would typically react by saying something like, "Oh, I guess you want to play with your little friends more than spend time with me, huh?" Peter would feel a panic inside. What had he just done? He must have been selfish to want to play with his friends instead of her. A crushing guilt would come over him. He learned to turn down his friends' invitations to play. His life became much smaller, but at least he was no longer hurting his mother. Peter could not possibly know that it was his mother's issue that she could so easily feel unloved by others. Nor could he discount her reactions to his healthy needs to have friendships outside of the family. He had to adopt a belief that he was selfish by nature and had to curb this nature or hurt people that he cared about. Now, wanting to have friends was further proof of his selfishness that he must surrender. We now understand how the scapegoat child must adapt to their parents' vulnerability to feeling unloved. Let us take a look at how this adaptation can play out in adulthood. How adult scapegoat survivors experience this fear. Scapegoat survivors may see that closeness to others requires navigating a minefield. It can seem like a matter of when, not if, another person will be disappointed in their ability to love. When one person is disappointed, the survivor cannot argue against their claims. The scapegoat survivor is responsible for the other's feelings, so the other is always right. And this is just how the logic works, not how things work in or should work in reality. If the other person feels disappointed, then all that is left for the scapegoat survivor to do is to try to fix it. The solution may be to work hard to prevent others from feeling dissatisfied with them. Here are some ways this solution can show up in the lives of adult scapegoat survivors. First, being sure to keep the same focus of attention as the other person. For instance, when in the same room, you might feel like you need to be interested in whatever the other person is interested in. Two, only allowing others to end interactions. It may feel like the other person will take great offense if you are the one to end an interaction, say a phone call or a greeting. Third, reacting rather than acting. Taking initiative in the presence of the other could risk them feeling unloved. The scapegoat survivor may train themselves to be inert until the other needs their response. This can prevent the other from feeling left behind, though at great cost to the scapegoat survivor's freedom. So the survivor knows that others only feel loved by showing constant admiration and obedience to them. Survivors can never relax and say, take for granted that others know they love them. At its root, love can grow to feel very transactional. The scapegoat survivor is always one step away from failing to love the other enough. So let's go back to Peter's case. After college, he took a job as an analyst for a nonprofit in a large city. He worked hard, yet never felt like he had done enough. In his performance reviews, he would brace himself for his supervisor to tell him that he was underperforming. Instead, all he heard was praise, and this confused him. They must be holding something back, he told himself. Peter was also in a relationship with a woman named Maria. He was preoccupied with Maria's happiness with him. He carried around a fear that she would interpret one of his choices or actions to mean that he did not really love her. This gave him pause whenever he considered doing something that did not involve her. He had a friend at work named Charlie who he got along really well with. One day, Charlie said, "Hey man, this is a lot of fun. We should hang out sometime. Want to go to the driving range this Saturday?" Peter knew that Maria liked for him to help her with projects around her home on weekend days. He felt a mix of excitement at Charlie's invite and dread of hurting Maria if he accepted. He was convinced that she would feel abandoned and betrayed if he joined Charlie. So he decided to avoid this feared outcome and said, "Oh, sorry, dude, I told my girlfriend I would help her with something that day." Overcoming the fear of not loving enough. So love is not, in fact, based on demonstrations of admiration and obedience. It is inferred from a general sense of the other's actions, attitudes, and feelings about you. Therefore, it's not contingent on continual demonstration. It can just be, and life can be lived on top of this assumption. To take this in, we need to participate in new relationships where this is how love is thought about and shown. One resource where you have very high odds of finding this approach is in therapy. Most therapists do not struggle with feeling unloved like a narcissistic parent would. So scapegoat survivors have reason to trust that the therapist will not be disappointed, say, in the way that the survivor participates in the therapy. Instead, survivors can find their therapist to be emotionally stable and caring towards them. Actually, trusting these new experiences can take considerable time. When you don't have to worry if the other feels cared about enough by you, then you have a lot more options. It's no longer dangerous to take the other's sense of your care for them for granted. You can explore your thoughts and feelings more easily. One thought that becomes easier to accept is that you were never responsible for your parents' feelings. Their sense of being unlovable was not something you caused, nor controlled, and nor could you cure. Well, another resource that may help is a module in my online course called The Empowerment Blueprint for Adult Scapegoat Survivors. And in module 3, which is titled Absolving Yourself of Responsibility for Your Parents' Pathological Narcissism, I go into greater depth on how this came to be and what you can do today to free yourself. As with all the modules in the course, there's an extensive assignment designed to help you apply this material to your life today. You can find the link to the course in my pinned comment in the comments section below. Closeness to others feels safer because they do not accuse you of not loving them enough. You do not have to worry about the trapdoor that such accusations present. It becomes much easier to be open and vulnerable with the people who matter to you. With safe people, taking the risk of being honest evokes the same from them. They would rather know what you really think and feel than hear just what flatters them. As these experiences accrue, it becomes easier to protect yourself if anyone does accuse you of not loving them enough. Now you know otherwise. If someone unreasonably claims that you do not show them enough care, you do not have to blindly accept it anymore. You now have the option of seeing such an accusation as a reflection on them rather than just you. Well, when Peter was 25, he was inconsolable because Maria had just broken up with him. She said that she was just not happy in their relationship and wanted it to end. He thought he had done everything he could to make her happy with him. He felt like he had fallen into a vat of self-loathing and shame that felt impossible to climb out of. He decided he needed help and made an appointment with a therapist. In their first session, Peter told his therapist named Jeanette that he wanted help to change so that he could get Maria back. When asked what he needed to change about himself, he said, I guess everything. I don't think I was supportive enough of Maria for her to want to stay with me. His therapist's spidey sense started to tingle because Peter did not seem like a self-absorbed, uncaring guy. She wondered whose conclusion it was that he was not supportive enough of Maria. Was it his or hers? She said, I see. Can you give me an example of how you were not supportive enough of her? Peter said, Sure, I have a friend at work named Charlie, and Maria would always say that I liked spending time with him more than her. Jeanette asked, How much time did you tend to spend with him? Oh, he said, we hung out maybe once per month. And Jeanette said, Wow, so you saw your friend once per month, but your ex-girlfriend would repeatedly accuse you of caring more about him than her? And Peter said, Well, it sounds sort of bad when you put it that way, but I mean, yeah, I guess so. Jeanette said, How did you feel when Maria would make these claims? Peter realized that no one had asked him how he felt about the way he was treated. He was not used to his feelings being seen as important. He said, Well, I didn't like it. I felt stifled, but I hated making her unhappy with me even more. So it was a sacrifice I was willing to make. And this began Peter's journey with his therapist, where he grew to understand why he was so fearful of disappointing others with how he loved them. He and his therapist saw how he concluded this to make sense of his mother's entitlement to being the center of his world. All the while, he was having a different experience in the therapy with Jeanette. He was repeatedly shown that his feelings mattered in their therapeutic relationship, that she did not require the same kind of constant attention to her happiness that his mother and seemingly Maria did. And her goodwill towards Peter did not waver when he told her about how he was putting himself first in his life. So, in summary, scapegoat survivors of narcissistic parents often fear that they don't love others enough. And this can stem from their parents' inability to feel lovable, which can create a very distorted dynamic where the child is made responsible for the parent's emotional well-being. And this can lead to transactional relationships and feelings of inadequacy. Overcoming this fear can mean realizing that love does not require constant proof. Safe, trusting relationships like those in therapy can help scapegoat survivors see, challenge, and break these patterns. So I hope you found today's video helpful. Some of these challenges kind of resonated with you. And I want to thank everyone for your continued support of the channel and the videos and of each other in the comments section. And I always want to reiterate that this process of kind of I guess shedding the lessons of this sort of painful past is very incremental and very much a process. So the more compassion and patience that one can offer, the better, and that it's always kind of like a upward linear process, I think, but kind of tends to kind of wiggle up and down. So just because one day maybe feels harder than another doesn't mean that things are off the rails, that the trajectory can still be in the upward direction. Well, with that, I look forward to posting again next Friday. Take care.